Hello, there is Impossible Creations and welcome in a tutorial for Legs Animator. It's introduction video in which I will cover the most essential features for this asset. If you will find it interesting, check the other tutorials too. The Minotaur model we will use in this video is free asset available on the asset store. Okay, let's go. After importing Legs Animator and Minotaur to the project, I will put it on a scene. Add component Impossible Creations Legs Animator. And before doing anything, we need to define the most important references to the bones. You can use button Find to automatically search for the hips bone, but in case it don't find it, you can go to the hierarchy, find skeleton bones, and you should be able to identify which bone is pelvis, which are legs. Pelvis of course needs to be parent of the legs. Now you can use another auto find button to define legs. If it's humanoid rig, it's always proper, but for other rigs it can use wrong bones, so always verify it or do setup manually. So I will hit add leg, and you can assign your leg bones by drag and dropping them from the hierarchy, or you can use the helper gizmos for it. It suggests child bones of hips. When upper leg is defined, it will draw quick select buttons on every child bone, with which you can quickly define if it's lower leg bone or it's foot bone. Now, when all three bones of the leg are defined, you can hit the big button on the left up to set up all possible leg bones in hips in the same way. It will be big speed up in setup for the spider creatures. You can also drag and drop other upper leg bone here, and it will be set the same way like the first leg. An algorithm needs to know which leg is opposite leg, so we need to define it. Okay, there you see the white ghost of the opposite leg for the currently selected leg. And now when we hit play, it should already work. Let's first change the animations. So I want just to play the idle animation and make it loop. I will also make loop for the walk and run for later. And now when we move character, the system will work, or when we rotate it. But now let's focus on the setup details. When you select leg, you will see here option for using feet bone. And to show what it does, I need to use other model. It will apply extra algorithm, which can add extra range for the leg by raising heel up instead of moving whole foot. But it's really optional feature. You can always even disable rotating whole foot, which may be not useful for humanoids, but maybe more for the spiders, because they don't have foot. It can save a bit of performance. I will cover a bit more details per leg later when we go to the IK category. Now there we see scale reference value, which is actually one of the most important parameters. It will define how big steps should do the character. It defines how far physical raise can reach and many other things. All you need to know is to set it to be like average size of the character. If it's humanoid, it will be height from hips to ground. If it's spider, it will be height from the head to the ground. And you don't need to be extremely precise. You can freely increase this value if you want the character of the animation to be like bigger steps or smaller and quicker. But setting it in average size will give the most balanced motion. And I will skip these two parameters below, you can check tooltips or manual for description. Well, the settings out of the box are the most universal ones, but if you are making setup for an insect, I recommend to apply insect preset first. It will change the most important parameters and add modules like leg helper to trigger leg steps like spider, so not raising multiple legs at once. Now let's go to detection category. There we define physical layers for detecting collision with ground, defining max raycasting distance, you can see on the gizmos. And I will actually skip all other parameters, you can check the tooltips or manual, I will cover them in the other tutorial videos. Now the IK category. If your character knee is bending wrong, you can try different hint modes. Limit leg stretch is defining if leg can go full straight. Other model will show it more clearly. Fully stretched leg is often looking bad. Also going to full stretch is often really sudden. so it's worth trying this parameter. With fit Y offset you can just raise the fit up or down, just for the correction if needed. And now IK leg details. There you can assign individual modifiers to make each leg move differently for randomization. It can really improve motion for the insects. You can also assign custom leg motion preset for each leg, but I will cover it later. You can also use the red dice button to automatically randomize the values, but for humanoid I will restore it. And down below there are internal algorithm parameters, which can be used for solving exception error cases. And the last category is optimizing, so you can smoothly fade out the legs animator when character is far from the camera or is not visible in camera view. Finally, let's go to motion. And when you add legs animator, the default settings are fit align, the hips adjustments, body stability, idle gluing, and rotation stability module. Okay, now let's talk about all these things. We will start with basic fit align, but first I need to disable gluing to show you fit align more clearly. I need to add to the scene sphere collider, so we will see the effect. So the settings in the main category of the motion are mostly related with the fit align, and that's it you see right now. So character is adjusting leg on the ground below, and it's synchronized with the animation, so if we play walk animation it also will work properly. The leg elevate parameter is raising leg a bit up when ground below foot is higher than current source animation foot height. You can check demo scenes for better representation of it. In demo scenes you will also find other examples for the parameters I will not cover in this video. Okay, now let's restore the idle animation. And to show other parameters I will enable back the gluing. Limit fit yaw will clamp the rotation in y-axis for the foot. So when you set angle to 0, fit will always rotate with the character. But if you set it higher, it will be more planted, but you get the most natural looking effect when you set it pretty low. Step points overlap radius will push legs if they are too close to each other, so you may find it useful in some cases if your character with its motion tends to put legs very close to each other. Okay, now hips category and body adjust. To show you what it does, I need to add box colliders to the scene, put character on it, hit play and adjust the max step down range. With it you define how low the character can step down. You can adjust how quick it happens. So when character is higher, but it detected ground in range under some foot, it brings body down to make leg reach the ground level. In some cases you may find the body step up useful. So when character is lower but the legs detected ground above, it adjusts body up. But it's parameter more for quadrupeds than the humanoids or insects. Unground fade speed defines how rapidly legs animator will fade out when you inform legs animator that your character is jumping or falling. Okay, now let's go to stability. There you can choose the stability algorithm. The biped algorithm is actually old one, the universal is new one and I recommend using it, but you can try the biped always to see the effect. But what it's doing? Let's enter play mode. I will move the character to the side, but to show it more clearly I will increase range for the glue-in. Now stability can reach more extreme values, and best way will be to compare with 0 stabilize and 100%. So algorithm is trying to keep hips in the center of the two legs, adjusting pose dynamically to make it look more like character will not fall down, make it more stable. You can get different character of this motion by synchronizing it with current animation or with initial pose of the character. I will increase the reaction speed to show effect as clearly as possible. Yeah, now it's easier to see what it's doing. Setting reaction speed lower and doing the blending can give more natural feeling of the animation, but the parameters are for you to adjust the animation character for your needs. Push hips on leg move will add impact to the hips when procedural step animation is executed. Bringing it up will create two extreme effects, but then you can lower reaction speed for an instance to get different effects. And as you can see, with value set to 0, the motion is very poor, so it's important parameter. You can also control how hips are pushed up or down with push Y blend to control how the animation looks like. The N toggle on the right is normalizing the push impact, which is more dedicated for the insects than the humanoids. Another parameter is hip stretch preventer. It tries to push hips in the direction of the most stretched leg to minimize stretch effect. I recommend to use it carefully. Stabilize on is moving is smoothly fading the stabilize effect when you inform Legs Animator that your character is moving, because you might not want to have full stabilize effect during character is running. It could disturb the source animation depending on the settings you set. And the elasticity. It's adding extra jiggle to the computed animation for the hips, giving more natural feeling to the animation. When you set elasticity to 0, the motion can look more linear. Default settings for the stability are stable, but you can play with them a bit if you want to get some like cartoon effect. You can also try activating motion influence, so when your character moves, some of its velocity will be applied to the hips motion. And you can also control each axis with it. Like for example, you don't want to inherit side's velocity, but you want to maintain some of the y-axis velocity. Okay, now the most complex feature of this plugin, which is gluing. Gluing is generating transition animation from point 1 to point 2 for the leg. It's controlling when leg can be detached from one point. You can define character of the leg animation with use of few curves. And thanks to this feature, character can do small realistic steps or rotate in place nicely. And this kind of motion is called idle gluing. There is second mode, which is called movement gluing, which is dedicated for walking, running animation to eliminate the effect of a sliding feet when character moves with different speed or runs up the hill, run and rotates, etc. The most effective way to control it is setting glue mode to automatic and inform Legs Animator that your character is stopped or is moving. Gluing attachment system is pinning to the objects, so it don't need to be ground for it to work. As you can see on the scene gizmos, the glue range threshold is defining range when a foot should detach, and the maximum threshold range is controlled by the scale reference we set earlier. But you can freely change it by entering the IK details, individual settings, and their glue threshold multiplier. Glue fading speed is mostly affecting the movement gluing, but we now focusing on idle gluing, so let's skip it for now. Allow glue below foot adds a bit more range for the gluing attaching, making it easier to blend in for the algorithm. Glue fade out speed is also affecting the movement gluing the most, so let's skip it. Unglue on is defining angle in which foot should detach, so when character rotates, when this value is high, it waits only for the glue range threshold to be exceeded. But if you set it low, you will notice that the legs are detached sooner. It's pretty often useful. Now allow glue drag. To show this effect better, I need to increase glue range threshold a lot, so I will go to the IK details and make glue range threshold huge. Alright, now let's move character far from this attachment point. And now you see when the distance is big, then leg is being dragged a bit. And it's a very important parameter for dynamic characters, or for any character which is moving actually. It's eliminating the weird motion when the character is doing big steps or it's moving fast. Swing helper is another parameter which is mostly affecting the movement gluing, so it's for later. And gluing floor level is almost the same thing as the allow glue below foot parameter. Now let's focus on the idle glue motion. There you define how the procedural animation of a leg transition looks like. Notice that you can always preview effect of the curves on a simplified leg animation in the background of this panel. First, step move duration. It's actually the most important parameter. It should be precisely adjusted with the scale of the creature and with speed how it's moving in a world. This duration value is actually modified by the speedups parameter, but I will talk about it later. Okay, now the curves. Move to goal curve is straightforward movement of the leg from point 1 to point 2 without leg rise. So if we set it like this, the leg will move a bit further, exceeding the goal, but will go back to target point. I will change the move duration to be higher to see it better. And there you should notice the curve effect. Let's see with leg faster movement. Well, it looks nice, but let's make it a bit more subtle, so leg will not exceed goal so far. Okay, now spheris track curve. It will push leg trajectory to the side when moving towards goal. Let's set extreme values to see actually what's going on. I will increase power a bit more, and you should notice that it's doing exactly what I said. Now it should be easier to understand. And you see that it can add a nice character to the animation. You can also make curve go with negative value to make even different effect. Okay, now min-max foot rise. When procedural step is small, then the min rise will be executed, but when step is far, then height will be closer to the max value. Rise y-axis curve is another important parameter. It gives flow to the transition. Let's make here a really extreme track, with which you should fully understand how you can use this curve. Okay, and there you go. So this curve is not for practical use, but you see that you can go crazy with a leg animation character. Okay, let's restore it. Now allow speedups parameter. It's really important to increase it for really dynamic characters. It makes the transitions quicker when the leg is stretched too much, when the attachment conditions for opposite legs are critical, or when character is rotating fast. Then allow speedups is solving problem of too slow leg movement animation, like you see. With allow speedups 0 it can't keep on. Okay, allow detach before allows to detach leg before opposite leg finishes transition. So if you set it low, the character can do like small jumps, but for humanoids it's not recommended to change this value. This parameter is more dedicated for the insects. Okay, push hips on legs move is actually value which is applied to impact hips with push hips on leg move parameter we covered before. So if you set this curve to 0, hips will not be pushed at all. Like you set curve like to rise on the end. Then hips will be pushed when the leg finishes the animation, like you see. Feel free to experiment, maybe you will find some nice motion for your character. The refresh button on the top is restoring all curves to the default ones. And the last foot rotation curve. It's rotating foot up and down over the progress of the animation transition. Well, Minotaur don't have feet, but you see the effect anyway. Let's lower the push hips on leg move since it's annoying. Alright. And now let's focus on a movement gluing. I will switch back the walk animation. And temporarily I will change glue mode from automatic to the movement. Okay, and as you notice, it's just snapping foot to the ground. The procedural animation step is not played, so it's not conflicting with the walk animation. Now you can see the glue fade in speed effect more clearly. So it's speed of snapping to the ground. And glue fade out speed is speed of unsnapping from the ground. And I recommend to keep fade in speed high and fade out speed lower. When using movement gluing, don't forget about glue range thresholds, since it's very important here. Allow glue below foot and gluing floor level is also very important. It's defining when foot is snapping to the ground. And it can be really problematic sometimes. In some cases you will need to use animation curves, and you can use built-in custom module to handle it, but maybe you don't need it. Swing Helper can solve this. If you give some information to the Legs Animator about the direction in which character is running, like the velocity, it will compare this velocity value with the current leg swing direction. Then algorithm will not allow foot to snap if leg is swinging in the same direction. I will quickly add rigid body which moves forward. Read the velocity from it. And here result. So you see that foot is not reattaching to the ground in wrong moments. But let's see it on a brighter floor. So without Swing Helper there are inconsistencies. But when we bring it up, it's fixed. Now for a fun, let's make this character moves really slower than the animation. And you see that the snapping is still working properly. When we disable, you see the sliding. But with gluing it looks nice even now. Okay, let's go to modules. With custom modules you can add a lot more features to the Legs Animator. There is a lot of modules provided in the package, but you can also implement your own modules, since they don't need to modify core of the Legs Animator. Rotation Stability is module which is added always to the new Legs Animator, and it's using the calculated body stability data to rotate hips in addition to the hips impacts and offsets. You can play around with this module and all others to see what you can get. Now final extra category. Under helpers, you find few utility parameters. You can use extra pelvis offset to debug behavior of a body or freely change it through coding. Repose gluing after is adjusting legs after character stops moving. Useful for character controllers. You can toggle glue only on idle. If setting up movement gluing is too problematic for your character. Then down below there are parameters for push impacts. With a button you can quickly preview the basic push impact. You can trigger custom ones through coding or with custom modules. I will show it in a while. Here you can control behavior for the pushes. Sometimes elastic pushes can bring character too high, so you can dump it. You can also change elasticity blend for the impact to make it a bit more linear. There are examples of module with push impacts, and it can trigger push impacts when character starts to move, stops, or lands on ground. And to make it work, we need to give information about being grounded state to the Legs Animator. I will go to Control, where we can set Animator's variable name, which Legs Animator will try to read to define the grounded state. Now let's add variable in the Animator. I will add this moving as well. Now under Control you can debug the Legs Animator grounded and movement state. Okay, now let's go to modules. And there you see two references of module, because Legs Animator is generating copy of module to use it only on self. So we enter play mode reference to change settings with preview in a game view. I will just change start move value to 0 to not use it. And now when we change is moving to false, module is triggering stop impact. When is grounded is changing from false to true, module is triggering land impact. And we can adjust all these settings to make the impact as we want it. We can add extra rotation to the impact, so you can design it in any way you want. So push impacts is also a really important feature of a plugin. You should find it really useful. So I already covered some of the features which are available under Control. So you can use the Unity Animator variables to define its moving, its grounded state, instead of writing custom code which would reference to the Legs Animator core. There is also a sliding parameter which would fade out the gluing, because if you have character which moves on, for example, on the ice you want to slide, or when a character is sliding from a steep terrain. There is also a ragdoll parameter, which can fade out whole Legs Animator motion. There also will appear additional field for a spine, but it will be visible only if some module is asking for spine bone. And the last extra thing is Compact Profiler. After entering play mode, you can hit the green bug icon to display analysis of cost of Legs Animator. You can switch between different functions of Legs Animator, like disabling gluing, disabling modules or others, and track how it changes time required by Legs Animator to execute. After changing some parameters, always move character a bit, it can sometimes jump to higher cost or lower. So just switching one feature and checking the cost is not always precise. You may find it helpful when you're working on characters with many legs. You can also disable raycasting but enable the gluing, so you can reduce the cost of physics if you don't need to detect the uneven terrain. Okay, for a final touch, we will add bone stimulator to the spine bones and for the arms to make the motion more organic. So I will initialize the spine bones and change the settings a bit to be more subtle. And the same for the arms, and I need to correct some of the bones. And by combining these two plugins you get effect like this. In the future I will release upgrade plugin for Legs Animator, which will focus on humanoids, and it will control motion like this too, but in a more extensive way. Alright, and I think that's all. There is much more in the plugin, but I think that the most essential subjects were covered. Other parameters and different approaches for the setup will be covered in other tutorial videos. And don't forget to check manual. So thank you for watching, hit a like, subscribe for more, leave a comment if you have some questions, and I'll see you next time, bye bye.